All right, welcome to the first critique of assignment 1. And what we were doing in this assignment was basically introducing yourself. You were to work with found content, typography, photography, illustration, infographics, to introduce yourself visually. And you had to address certain questions. And the goal was to answer the questions with visuals and typographic titles or headlines. So, your name, where you're currently located, your go-to beverage, because I think we all have one, most recent book or series that you binge watched, that's hard to say, your most admired artist, visual designer, your creative hero, your design hero, whatever you want to refer them to, or refer whatever you want to refer to them as. Basically, person who most inspires you, whether living or dead. Your ultimate design goal. Are you more Mac or PC oriented? And your favorite color or color scheme. And then pulling from printed materials, stuff around the house, easy to find, magazines, junk mail, things like that, downloads. And then we had physical specifications. Even though we're doing this digitally, it's a 9x12 assignment. It's a 9x12 design space. It needed to be vertical. And it needed to not just be art, it needed to actually communicate. So let's start with this one. This is Paula. Hello, Paula. And it's basically taking an infographic approach overall. It's very minimal in terms of imagery. Everything is ordered. There are conventions that are being used here. There is a center line, a center axis, making this pretty much symmetrical or approximately symmetrical in balance. We do consider the entire design, not just the active content. The active content are the figure, the inactive content is the ground. Both the ground and the figure elements are part of the design. So one thing I stress is that the entire design is the design. The only time where you are not regarding a background is usually with a logo or an icon. In this case, since you have a 9x12 space that you're dealing with, the entire design is the design, both the background and the foreground. So the choice of white as the background is part of the design decisions that were made on this. So there's a center axis. There is a stacking of 3 up, 3 down for these 6 images, these 6 circles. There's a bit of infographic, caption, explanation to it. The letters of the name are filled with a pattern, and because of the white in the pattern, those letters become somewhat integrated with the background. This and this are dark, and everything else is light. And so the eye's going to catch here, and it's going to catch here because that's where there is the most contrast. So we're communicating in the overall design a very orderly idea. And so that gives us some clues. There is an attention to how the space is arranged. There's an attention to how the space is divided. So we have kind of this zone here. We have the zone here, and then we have the zone of the name. So there's kind of 3 zones. And if we look at this area right here, it seems to be a square. So this distance equals the distance from the bottom, the baseline of the design, to this first division. We're using a little bit of layering. The focus is on the information and on the greeting. Because of the breakup by the pattern in the letter forms, we kind of lose some of the letter forms. One thing that my eye caught immediately, and because this is a symmetrical design and we've got margins that are fairly even, it's fairly ordered all around, the word Paula, the name is not centered horizontally. There's a lot more distance here and a lot less distance here. So as you move forward, as you are making design decisions as to position and placement, take care with margins. Take care with positioning and alignment. Another thing we can note is that the spacing between the letters is a bit uneven. There's a sense of more space here and less space here. So that's a typography issue, and when you deal with when you take typography, you'll understand about letter spacing and proportional spacing versus absolute spacing. And those are just some things to think about going forward as you start to develop more design. So we're very clear here. The goal is illustration, kind of a illustrated map of the LA area. Just watched Ozarks. Actually, I just watched Ozark 2. Good person to emulate for the flat graphic style. Water's the go-to beverage, and definitely a Mac. If we think about making this as bare bones as possible, we really don't need the captions because the images, except for this one perhaps, really speak for themselves, and maybe this one. Because you have to know who this person is, and you have to recognize this particular style in order to know who this person is. So this one, it's good that you included her name here. This design has a strong poster feel to it, which is very much a graphic expression. Last binged L Word, I guess this is Generation Q. I actually had to go back and read your submission comments to kind of understand what was going on here. So I needed a little more explanation than just going by how things are presented here. And I also was not picking up on the go-to beverage. The idea of the matcha tea is not really relatable here. There's a lot of green and blue-green, and the whole color scheme is basically dominating on the green and blue-green. This was a little bit misleading. I know you were talking about your design goal being to connect and that there would be sort of a kindred spirit and things like that. This being the product that it is, it definitely relates to sustainability and all natural ingredients and very organic. And in fact, the way the entire figure is composed, we're getting that whole sense of sustainability and green design and natural organic products. So in that way, it's not communicating perhaps as well as it could. Obviously, Mac-based. And the most admired visual designer, I think you mentioned Basil Kincaid. LA is the area that is communicated really well. We get a strong sense of the city. So overall, it has a very strong graphic quality. The more saturated colors and the warmer colors definitely come forward of the cooler desaturated colors. There's a really strong sense of space and movement in this, which is really intriguing visually. And the fact that you've sort of interwoven the figure with the horizontal striping, the horizontal banding, is helping to integrate everything. There's a good sense of hierarchy to this, and it does, as I said, feel like a poster or magazine cover even. It's working on a lot of levels. Communication could be stronger, could be more immediate and impactful, leaving a little less to guesswork. Okay, so this is, we're in Los Angeles, and a little bit of a biography. This is almost like a resume. And we've got Starbucks, so that's the go-to, and Star Wars, and then the favorite artist or designer. So there's a lot of verbal explanation on this, and also your Mac-based. What is not really clear is the ultimate design goal. I'm assuming it's graphic design, maybe motion or title design, but that's not clearly stated here. The favorite color, the kind of the orange to the very warm red, is throughout in various levels of value. And so there's a cohesiveness with this, making the green stand out quite a bit. This does have kind of, as I said, a resume feel. Could be like a print ad, kind of one of those product feature pages in a magazine. So it's a little less infographic a little less abstract, especially with the verbal explanations. And so it kind of steps off track because we weren't trying to use a lot of caption or written paragraph format explanations with this. We were trying to communicate just with found imagery, whether it was downloaded digitally or you actually cut and pasted in the traditional sense, using snippets, bits of headlines, collage effects, things like that, rather than sitting down and writing out several paragraphs. So the heart of the assignment, the heart and soul, the purpose of the assignment is a little bit modified with this one because it kind of over explains. So your ultimate goal is to level up professionally. So this basically, your ultimate design goal is to become more capable and confident and competent as a designer. Okay, this one, it was submitted this way, and I kind of figured maybe the background, the cutting mat, is not part of the design, so I went ahead and cropped it. Although the mat itself kind of fits in with the color scheme, and with the repetition of the squares, you've got the color swatches in the design, and you've got the square Scrabble pieces, and kind of the large square versus the small square, and then all these squares. It would fit, but because of the way it's shot, it just seemed like this was the right idea, because here we have the gray border and the end of the border. So I went ahead and cropped it, so that's the way we're looking at it. So with this, ultimate design goal is sort of a little bit ephemeral. It's just changing directions. You're PC based. Favorite colors are in the blue and green, maybe into yellow. So that whole cool side of the color wheel. Definitely focusing on the blues. Insecure. Your name. Van Gogh is the most admired artist. What I'm not picking up is the go-to beverage, and I'm wondering if that is representing the go-to beverage. Location is here in LA, and not sure what the black and white is doing up here, what that's trying to represent. And then the dot. Is this part of the favorite colors? So we're actually accenting with the cool red, which is the magenta. It's not really clear. The layout's really interesting. It's definitely asymmetric, and so it has an interesting balance to it. It has a dynamic quality. Not sure about the need to repeat the color swatches, that gradation scale. Kind of gets in the way over here. Name is here. The magenta does balance out the red. Kind of, if we take an implied line straight down and connect those two, it's almost perpendicular to this diagonal. So there's some interesting things going on. There's a lot of layering. There's a strong division of the overall 9x12 design space. And there is a fairly strong sense of order to the way things are laid out. So we get kind of an idea of an understanding of the space, and then how to subdivide that in a way that's going to help you communicate what you need to communicate. As when we were talking about Paula's design, the entire design is the design, and that's the same for all of these. And the choice of how to incorporate background with the foreground is part of how the design communicates. With this, there's not a lot of background. The background is the blue. That's the starting point, and everything is built up from that. It's kind of nice that it looks like we actually did use Scrabble pieces here, and these are not images. We've got some nice drop shadows there. So it's a nice assemblage, a nice collage of things, has a richness to it, unifies well because of the color. It's comfortably balanced. So overall, it communicates well, which is what we're looking for. Okay, this one, the first impression, it's another one that reads a little more like a resume. The visual imagery is very subjugated. It's the smaller percentage, shall we say. It is less important than the words. There's a framing device that represents the outer perimeter of the design. So we assume that perhaps this is not part of the design out here because of the framing device is closing everything off. That's how our brains are going to work on this. So every time you have a framing device within the design, things beyond the framing device are not considered part of the design. So basically the design ends here rather than out here at the corner. If this border, this outside border, had a different color, then we would perceive it as being part of the design. So the images are small and there's a lot of text, and so we have to read through the text. The headline text is sort of a arts and crafts vibe to it. It does become difficult to read. We have to actually pull up and stop and look. Reiterating the directions within the design, it's a choice, and it's not necessary. And actually, in this case, given the heart and soul of what this is about, to communicate with image and typographic content, it's getting a little too overdone on the typography. A lot of white space, so we've got the white background. The goal here is not just to become a designer, but to do something with the design that is going to serve others. Okay, with an explanation, live in LA, and then cappuccino. So all the items have been included. So in terms of the information content, it's definitely complete. Again, a more interesting focus perhaps on how to juxtapose all these elements with more imagery and less typography, so you don't need to explain things, would be a goal. Well, a couple of things about design and the difference between design and fine art. Both design, let's compare them first. Both design and fine art use the same visual elements. We use color, texture, pattern, structure, point, line, plane, shape, volume. We all use these same things, but for different purposes. Design, and not just graphic design, all design is a communication medium. Even architecture, interior design, fashion design, they also communicate. Graphic design, with its subcomponents of user experience and website design and interactive design and AI design and things like that, these all are directly communication pursuits and visual communication pursuits. So the point of design is to communicate, and we can't, as designers, stand next to our designs and explain to the viewer or the end user what it is we're trying to say. Design, the work that we create, has to speak for itself. If you're walking into Trader Joe's and you're looking for their orange juice and you're looking for their no pulp orange juice, you have to be able to look at the design of the packaging, the design of that labeling, and understand what product you're looking for, or understand what that product is. If you're looking at Monster and Red Bull, they're both in the same product category, but very different packaging, so they're easily distinguishable. You know, you look at the various kombucha packaging, the various tea packaging, the various coffee packaging, even the little barcode labels that are now attached to fruit in the produce section. These are all communication. These are all graphic design. And they need to be self-explanatory. So this is one thing that all of you need to understand and consider. You are communicating. And most of the time you're not going to be communicating your own ideas. You're communicating your client's ideas so that they can achieve their goals. Keep in mind the details of any design brief, any design assignment. Keep in mind being as economical in your design as possible so that there's no confusion, so it doesn't have to be explained, and so that there's a clear understanding by the end user or the end viewer so that they can make the right decision. So again, one assignment, 5 very different solutions.